Hey everybody, it's Nick here again with another Power Platform Boost video where today I'm going to show you the brand new integration between DocuSign and Power Pages. Now, signing documents and agreements might not be the most exciting thing in the world, but if you've ever worked on a project where there was things like contracts or other things that you need to sign and you need to associate this with an electronic signature, you know that currently there's always quite a bit of development work to make that happen. To do this in Power Pages, there's now a new low-code way in Preview to allow you to do this. To try this out, you can easily get a DocuSign 30-day trial, so you can try this out for free. But DocuSign has a lot of great value to you as well if you're doing any kind of contracts or proposals or anything that needs to be signed off. So definitely check that out. We're not going to spend too much time in here. I'm just going to show you the basics. So I'm in my DocuSign e-signature portal, and that's the site where we can do we create the templates for our DocuSign. I've already uploaded the roommate agreement. That is a Word document that we're going to use for this example. Now, a couple things we want to look at this. First off, we are going to create a template. That's what Power Pages is going to use. Let's take a quick look at that template because there's a couple key things that we're going to need to capture. First off, we're going to need to make sure we capture the template ID. Now, the template ID is a GUID that will get generated by DocuSign. We're going to want to grab that GUID because we're going to need that later, so we're going to copy that. And then the other thing we're going to need is the roles and the name of the template. So the name of the template, I've called it Roommate Agreement. You can call it whatever you want. And then if we just take a look at some of the other features that I have set up for this, of course, I've added documents. I'm going to take a look at the recipients. And I haven't added a specific recipient because we feel in this case it's going to be whoever signed into the site is going to be the one signing off on those documents. So there I've grabbed it, set the role. I've just called that prospective roommate. We're going to need to know who the role is of the person signing. And of course, there's different features within DocuSign for signing up, the signing order, the different fields and that type of thing. Like I said, pretty powerful software, but our focus is more on the integration. So let's take a look at that. So now that we have our template set up in DocuSign, the next thing we need to do is configure our Power Pages site for the DocuSign integration. Now there's a whole series of steps here, but we're going to start off with how this is just going to work. So how this is going to work for our end users is they're going to go through a multi-step form process, and as part of that process, there's going to be a step where they're going to sign off on the documentation. So the first thing we need to do is go into the Power Pages Design Studio and let's create that whole multi-step process. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down Copilot for this. The other thing I need to point out is this is currently only for the standard data model. So if you've been playing around with the enhanced data model, that's cool, but currently the DocuSign integration only works for the standard data model. Next thing we need to do is let's go to our data workspace where we're going to need to configure a table and a whole process for, which will also include the sign off. So I'm basically going to create, first thing, again, we're in the data workspace. Let's make sure we set a specific solution. I've created a solution called DocuSign config. This is going to store all of our Dataverse configuration in a solution. And of course, once we get to the enhanced model being GA, we're going to be able to add all our site assets to that solution as well. So we've got that all set up. So let's create a brand new table. And again, if you've already know how to set up multi-step forms, you could skip over this step and go right to the DocuSign integration point. But there are a couple things here that are related to the DocuSign integration that maybe you want to pay attention to. So first, let's create a brand new table. So I've creating a new table here. I've called it roommate application. The primary, I'm going to change that to application number. And this is just something that I do is I actually make these, the application numbers on the name field, usually an auto number, and we can talk a little bit about that. This is kind of an aside thing. The key thing here though for the DocuSign integration and this table is open up the advanced options and scroll down and make sure that you select creating a new activity under the make this table an option when, because we're going to be needing to add those DocuSign documents as activities. The setup will do this for us, but in order to do that, we need to make sure that this has been turned on. So we've got that. We're going to save, and this is going to, of course, create the table in Dataverse. So our table is created now. Let's add a couple new columns. So I've added some columns to the table. I've added the first name, last name, email address. I've set the application number to be an auto number. And I've also added a full name where I've used the Power Effects formula to concatenate the first and last name so we have a full name value. Very simple table. Now let's set up the forms that we're going to use in our multi-step process. So I've created the first step in my multi-step, created the form for the first step. I've just had the application number here. If you remember, that was auto number. So I've made that read only to allow that to be auto numbered. They're going to ask the user for their first name, last name, and their email address. So that's step one. So let's just save and publish this particular form. And now we're going to create a form for the next step. So I've created a form for the second step, and this is going to be our sign-off form. Like I said, this is a very simple multi-step form. Of course, in an actual project, there's going to be multiple steps. There's going to be condition branches and redirects and all that. But for now, we just have a two-step process. Step one, collect contact info. Step two is we're going to have the document sign off. All I've done in this form is I've had again, repeating the application number, and I also put that full name, that was that Power Effects formula name, just so we'd have that on the form for the user to see. So we'll just save and publish this. So now we have the beginnings of our multi-step form by creating the Dataverse forms for the step one and step two. Again, quick little recap. We're using the form designer that you see in Data Workspace is actually the model-driven app form designer, because in Power Pages, both for basic forms and multi-step forms, they use as a foundation, they use the model-driven app forms. I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but it all makes sense in the grand scheme of things. So we now have those two steps created for forms. Let's actually create the actual multi-step form on a web page. So first off, let's go and create a new web page. So I've created the web page, I've given it a title, I've added a spacer, and what we're going to do now is we're going to add that multi-step form. This is going to create a new multi-step form object, of which we're going to use the other form steps to create this. So basically, I'm just going to call this roommate application. We'll leave the show progress indicator on, and yeah, we will allow multiple entries per person. Let's just click OK here, and what this will do, of course, is create that metadata in the back. So the first thing we want to do is now add a step, and the step name, we're just going to call that contact info. The table we're going to choose is that table we just created, the roommate application table. And the forms, this is where we're going to select the forms that we created in the Data Workspace. So the first one is the contact info. We're not going to worry about attachments, and we're not going to worry about, again, new options. It's going to create a new record. We're not editing an existing record. That's all straightforward. We're just going to click OK here. So we have this displayed, and now let's add a new step. So we're going to click on Add Step here, and this is going to be our sign-off step. So we'll just call that sign-off. Again, it's pick the table, the roommate application. It is the same table. That's fairly typical in a multi-step form, although you can have different tables being populated. That's a whole other topic for another day. And then the form, this time I'm going to collect step two. So using the Design Studio, for those people that have created multi-step forms or advanced forms or web forms in the past using ADX Studio, you remember you are able to use tabs as well. If you want to use tabs, you're going to have to go into the portal management app to set up your multi-step form there. So today we're just keeping it simple, and we're just using multiple forms, and all good here. We're just going to click OK. And now we basically set up our form. The other thing we're going to need to do is we're going to add permissions. Of course, we're going to need table permissions in order for our users to fill in this information. Again, we just click there. It's picked the table for us already. For now, I'm just going to leave it pretty much as global access with read and create. Those are the permissions we need, but we do need to specify the roles. I'm going to choose authenticated users. Now, there's a reason I'm choosing just authenticated users. That's because with the DocuSign integration as it stands today, it is only available to authenticated users. So just keep that in mind as you're beginning to set this up. So for anonymous users, there won't be that sign up process. This might be something for the public preview, I'm not sure, but just keep that in mind. So let's just save this table permission. And now that we have this set up, let's just, for fun, let's just test out to make sure that this is working. So I'm just going to go select preview, and I'm going to choose desktop. And of course, now that I'm actually into my website, I'm getting that message that I don't have the appropriate permissions. That's true because I'm not signed in. What I'm going to do is hit sign in, and we're going to just sign in with our Azure Active Directory, just to keep it simple. So we're here on when we sign in, of course, the profile name. Now, the thing is, what we do need to do is we do need to fill this in. This is something that is required for the DocuSign integration. The profile information of the user being signed in does need to be filled in. This is a little bit different for most situations. You don't need this, but this is a case where we actually do. I'm just going to fill in some fake values here. But again, first name, last name, email are required for the DocuSign integration. So that's good. We're going to update the profile. And now we can continue with the roommate application. Now I realize that the fact that I am signed in, I am asking for first and last name and all this information does seem a little bit redundant. What I should do is go into the multi-step form metadata and pre-populate these fields. Let's not worry too much about that for now. I'm just going to fill this in. I'm going to use Bob Roberts as the name, and let's just do Bob at test.com. As again, this is just the demoing, so we're gonna hit next, and on the next step it's going to be blank on our sign off. You see we have the number, we have the full name, and we can just submit this. We don't have the sign off yet because we haven't got to that point of configuring the DocuSign integration, and that's going to be our next step. So we're just going to submit this. I just wanted to make sure that my multi-step form process was working correctly, and it definitely is. All right, so I'm back in the design studio now, and let's actually set up the DocuSign integration. For this, I'm going to go into the setup panel, and you'll see now that you have a tab here called External Apps Preview. If you don't see it just yet, don't worry about it. It is being rolled out across regions. So if you're on one of the regions that are on a different train, this is definitely coming. So let's select this, and we see that we have DocuSign integration here. So the first thing we need to do is actually install that. So if you click on install, this is going to install the DocuSign solutions into our Dataverse environment, plus do some additional configuration. The message here says it takes 5 minutes or more. I've been finding on testing it takes a little bit less than 5 minutes, so it should go pretty quick. So we see after a few minutes, we do have this is now installed. We now have our actions to hit configure. So we're going to select this. So this is where we're going to see that there's been new flows that have been created, the DocuSign envelope completed trigger and the DocuSign envelope create and sign flows. We're going to need to hook up our Dataverse and our DocuSign connections, plus a few other settings to these flows in order for this integration to work. So what we can do is we can just simply click and open up Power Automate directly from these links. So we're now in Power Automate. We're directly open. Of course, we see the flow checker has a little red dot. We see that our connection references have not been set up yet. So what we're going to need to do is to fix that. Easy thing, we're just going to go into Edit. And then I'm just going to sign in to Dataverse. Now, normally I would sign in with a service principal, but it actually signed in using my account here. That's fine for purposes of this demo. We're going to need to sign into our DocuSign account. And this is going to open up a little pop-up here where we're going to need to put in our login credentials for our DocuSign. Now notice we also had the ability to create a test account or a 30-day trial. You could do that as well, but of course we had set that up earlier. So we have that, it's a valid connection. Let's hit continue. Now this takes us directly into our Power Automate, and we are going to need to make some settings here. So I'm going to go into the trigger, which is when an envelope status changes. We're going to need to set the account ID. So now if I do the drop down here, let me just hide this. We do see here's my name. That's the name of my DocuSign account. So that's there, that's connected. Everything else we can just leave alone. So I'm just going to hit save. So if I click on my flows, I see this here. What I can do here is I can turn this on. So that's turned on. And then we're going to need to do the same thing here in the other flow that was created. Now I just went to my flows and got into it from there. Same thing, we're just going to need to make sure those connection references, or we could have gone back to our Power Pages Design Studio and clicked on that other link. Doesn't really matter as long as we make sure that the connections are correct and that the flow is turned on. For this particular flow, we don't need to make any changes here. We'll just save this. And then again, I'm just going to go, once that's done, I'm just going to go back to my flows here, and I'm going to basically turn this on. So we have those two flows connected. Those two steps are now completed. So now that we've configured the connection references to those particular two flows, I can actually check this. I have resolved the connection references and hit next. So now that's done. We can close this panel, and then we're going to have the next step. So here we have these actions to enable, but before we do that, we actually need to go to the cloud flows and set that up for the particular website. So we're going to need to enable the flows to the website. So here I'm going to go to cloud flows, and we should see that DocuSign envelope sign and create as the other cloud flows. We have to add this to the site. A couple ways we could do that. We can just hit this add cloud flow. We'll select it for the lookup. We see here there's the URL, and we're going to add roles. Again, I'm just going to choose the authenticated users because that's something the DocuSign integration requires. Make that simple, and I'm just going to add that to my site. So we have the message come up that the cloud flow has been saved to our site. That's cool. Let's go back and continue to configure our DocuSign integration. So returning to external apps, and basically we see the DocuSigns there. We're going to choose now enable, and this is the point we're going to add the template. Now you remember that we took some information from our DocuSign site, specifically the template ID, the template name, the role name, and we also need to know the table that we're linking this up to. So we're going to find our GUID. We got that here. The template name was roommate agreement, and the role name was potential roommate. Now, in terms of the table itself, we're going to choose the roommate application. That was a table we created for our multi-step form. Specifically, the step of the table that we need is that what we need to specify here. We could also do some mapping here. So for instance, I'm just going to choose the name, and I'm going to put that in, choose the full name here. Just as a mapping that we could use as part of this integration. Let's just hit save. And now we have this template set up here. So now we're going to need to go back into our actually multi-step form, and we're going to go to step 2. We're going to choose step settings, and this is where we have this integrations tab. So this is a new tab that you'll see, and I'm going to turn on enable e-signature. So let's flip the switch here, and then we're going to choose that roommate agreement template. We're going to click OK. And what this is going to do, it's going to configure basically an embedded grid that's going to show those signed off, those documents to sign off in our process. So we now see we have the setup here. This that's been part of our multi-step form, and we need to make sure that it saves to the metadata. So let's see how this works. Let's hit on preview, desktop. So again, we need to make sure we are logged in, put in a name. So it takes a few seconds, and then we see that we do have this grid with the signed documents, the name of the document pending. Let's just choose view and sign. And now that we see that we have this document come up, so we can just hit continue, and we see here is the document, the roommate agreement that we talked about earlier, and then we can just go here and hit sign. And we see here we have the full name and the initials coming here that I have the signed in user. I'm going to adopt and sign that. And that was the only place. We could have multiple places to sign off on or initial. We're good, ready to finish. We're just going to hit finish here. tells me I'm done signing, and I can just close this window now. And after basically a few moments, we're going to see that it has been completed. And actually I can go forward and submit and finish off my whole process or continue on other steps. But we see here the multi-step form has completed successfully. So that being said, this is how you set up the DocuSign integration into Power Pages. Like I said, it is a preview feature right now. You can send feedback to the team on the community forums if there's things that you don't like, or you have some questions, or you have some other ideas as well. So hope you enjoyed this video and look forward to the next one.